Well, I mean, I guess honor killing is when someone is killed because of violating what's deemed to be violating her family or her community's honor. And it could be anything from going out to the shops to, allegedly looking at someone the wrong way or having a relationship with someone. Very often it's actually not the case, but just being perceived to be having a relationship or not agreeing to abide by the rules that have been imposed on women, for example, not agreeing to marry the person your family wants you to marry, or wanting to study when you're not supposed to, or not dressing the way you're supposed to, not properly veiling, and so on and so forth. It could be for a variety of reasons. I mean, obviously, I think honor killings happens in a lot of various communities. It's not just, for example, the Muslim community where it happens, and there are a lot of evidence of it occurring, in varied places as well. From, I think, from Latin America to, the Middle East, North Africa, Asia, and obviously in the West as well. But I think I think religion and culture obviously have a huge part to play in it. And I think Islam particularly so, not because it's any worse than other religions, but because it's linked to a political Islamic movement. And therefore, I think it just makes the lives of women that are living under Sharia and Islamic law a lot more vulnerable and dangerous in a sense, because the Sharia law itself has a lot of rules and regulations that actually validate honor killings and support it and legitimize it. And so in that sense, it's quite linked with the movement, I think. And that's why I think fighting honor killing needs to also address the political Islamic movement and ensuring that religion is kept into the private sphere and not part of the public space and state and educational system, and particularly not the judicial system. I think there's a lot of things that predate possibly religion and capitalism as well, violence against women, patriarchy, and so on and so forth. But we're talking about something that's taking place in modern times, and therefore you have to see what it is in society that allows it to continue and perpetrates it. There's a lot of things that are not being practiced any longer because it's not seen to be useful anymore, So in that sense, the fact that violence against women continues to be so prevalent, even in, in Western countries, domestic violence as an example, shows that there's something about the value of having women oppressed and the violence against women that's very profitable and good for the system. And I think religion has a very key role in perpetrating that. So in that sense, that it was better than times before Islam came or before other religions came, fine, but that's still not good enough for, people living in the 21st century. And so in that sense, I find that sort of argument more an argument to defend religion rather than the human being. And I think if you start with women and if you start with their rights and the fact that violence and particularly honor killings are unacceptable, then you do need to address all of the causes, and religion is part and parcel of that as well, and the cultural norms that allow for it to happen. I mean, I think in a sense, if you're looking at political Islam in particular, it's very linked to honor killings, and I think honor killings are on the rise because this movement is on the rise. So, you have a situation, for example, in Iraq, where Muqtada al-Sadr has said that if you don't have honor killings, then you've got to deal with the adultery and have stoning sentences. It's linked. In a way, what he's saying is that honor killings is a way of addressing adultery rather than the state actually issuing sentences of stoning. And so in that sense, I think it's actually, and that's why you see in a situation like Dua Khalil's stoning, the Iraqi police stand by, or in many situations, even in a country like Jordan, which is seen to be, better than a lot of other Middle Eastern countries, you see that actually the woman who's going to be threatened with honor killing is the one who's imprisoned for her supposed safety for years on end, and not the person who's threatened her. And so in that sense, you see how the law and the state actually work hand in hand to legitimize it to a large extent. And even in Europe, we know until very recently, those who committed honor killings were actually given reduced sentences. even in in European courts, because it was seen to be a cultural issue, and the need to avenge one's honor is important in that culture, and so on and so forth. So in a sense, I think obviously good people everywhere can intervene and stop it, but I think. And including religious leaders. But I think the problem is not going to be solved by trying to say this is not part of Islam. Well, some people will agree and others won't agree. I think the way you're going to address it is by ensuring that political Islam is stopped and that Sharia law is stopped and Islamic states are stopped, I think. And it will have a key role in changing and reducing honor killings, because let me just explain it this way. The law is important, when you want to defend rights and stop violence. Domestic violence still continues, but it is criminalized in many countries, like in the West. So it's a crime. You're ostracized if you're seen to be someone who's committing domestic violence. It's not looked on upon as something positive. That people don't gather around to protect the man who's beaten his wife to a pulp. In Britain, for example. And so in that sense, the law is important because one, it draws the line and says something is just not acceptable, and it helps to change attitudes, not the other way around. So in that sense, I think stopping Sharia laws which actually consider women discriminatory and actually perpetrate violence against women will be an important step in stopping honor killings as well. And I know we're talking about honor killings in Europe, but Sharia is in Europe, being practiced in Europe as well. So in that sense, I think it's not so separate from political Islam and Sharia laws as they often want it to seem to be. It's tribal, and it's something that has nothing to do with us, and it just gives us a bad name, sort of thing. That's what the Islamists often say. Whereas in fact, if you look at it not even very closely, you see that they're quite linked, and what they do and what they say and their rules and laws are actually honor killing on a massive scale by the state and by political movements. I mean, I do think that it's very linked. I think that, there's an example that in Pakistan in the 70s when Sharia law came in, that I think the number of women prisoners increased by 70% as a result, because women, and their sexuality and their control became criminalized. And I think there's a direct link with that. So I think very clearly you see if the Islamists take control in an area in Iraq, you see that women are told not to come out anymore without the veil. They're threatened, they're beaten, and it's the same everywhere, really, when they get control of even a neighborhood. And so in a sense, it makes sense that if they're on the rise and they're vying for political power in Europe, and a place like Britain where there is one of their strongholds, really, it's natural to see a rise in honor killings as well, and in just the diminishing of the value and the status of women in general. Because I think, in a sense, what marks them out, and I think all religions, but particularly those when they're linked with political power, is that they often target women first and girls first, and you see that everywhere, And in that sense, I think honor killings is that sort of the more visible sort of aspects of the heinous aspects of it. And then the increase in veiled women, and particularly women in all-encompassing chadors, and with niqabs, something that you saw a lot less of in the West, is, I think, all very much linked to it. And it's a way of controlling, restricting women and diminishing their rights, their freedoms, their value. It's not something that's only, related to the Muslim community or political Islam. But I think what happens is that if you have the rise of a religious movement, it helps the rise of other religious movements as well, and strengthens that too. So if you have, for example, it being taboo to speak out against or criticize religion, and particularly Islam, and then on a question of freedom of expression, let's say, you have then Sikhs coming out and saying the Besti play needs to be shut down, and the Christian right coming out and saying Jerry Springer the opera needs to be shut down. In a sense, they strengthen each other, and they're quite good pals, actually, even though they they act like they're not. In a sense, I think, you know, when the Archbishop of Canterbury comes out and says Sharia law is inevitable and there are good parts to it as well, it's because he actually believes, I think, the reason he's doing that is because he thinks by strengthening Sharia courts, he can strengthen the waning influence of the Church of England as well, because it is very linked with each other. And so in a sense, I think if there's a rise of a political Islamic movement, it paves the way for the rise of other religious, political religions. And of course, in all of the situations, it's women and girls who are the first victims of it, but it affects much more than that, and the society as a whole as well.